connecting with me, maybe at a deeper level, and then backtrack, clarify, and summarize, go through, like you said, a couple rounds of that. And at some point, one of the sticking points in this though, is at what point do you move to a solution? Do you say, do you feel understood? Is there anything else? Because if they keep bringing more stuff up, at some point you need to cut them off and say, okay, now is the time for a solution. When would that part be, Rick, if you're having someone that's really just unloading and you have spent maybe a half an hour and you're open the conversation, maybe it'll last 15 minutes. When do you cut them off and how do you do that effectively?
Well, you'd probably go, well, what do you want right now? What do you want? If they keep going. So what do you want? This is what you have to do with whining, because whining is in big generalizations, but specifics are the first step to problem solving. And so that you say, what's wrong? They say everything's wrong. What specifically? All of it. When does it occur? It happens all the time. Who's doing it? Everybody. And you're going to have to like be relentless. And even if you recycle questions, that's okay, to get deep into that deeper structure. But in answer to your question, when do you move forward? It's the other factors. How much time are we? Are we in a meeting now with somebody and we just dealt with a know-it-all and we got to finish this meeting in 10 minutes? So your logistics and situations are probably going to dictate that. You might, all right, we have to continue this conversation later, but I appreciate you sharing with me how you felt about what happened on that project, whatever. So it's really the logistics of things, I think, that dictate how much time you have and is it worth the amount of time. But I do want to circle back to something you said, blending, because we didn't mention that concept. And blending is in a multitude of ways. And you mentioned one of them, body language, nodding. If you and I are getting along, you're sitting, I want to be sitting. You lean forward, I lean forward. You lean back, I lean back. And you can get to, you get a little itch and suddenly I get itchy in the same place. This is direct body mirroring, as you mentioned. Sometimes people do something indirect. Somebody could be a foot wiggler and you don't get your foot going, but before you know it, you've got a pen going. Similar, but different. So there's that body language blending. And then there's verbal blending. If somebody says, it was incredible, we go, it was. Oh, you should have been there. I should have. When you match their volume and intensity and their verbal, that's blending. And then where we started was having people feel understood, which is one of the most powerful blending skills you can ever develop. The first two are more unconscious, the body language and the verbal, but the conscious part is understanding.
No, that's great. And I even like how you break it into the quadrants of the lens of understanding. So in applying blending strategy to the 4 intents that people have to get it done, intent would be keep your communication with them brief, right? And to the point, so as not to obstruct them. Then you'll increase understanding and decrease misunderstanding.
Definitely.
The get it right one is, well, okay, blending would mean pay attention to the details because they want to make sure you get it right. And you don't miss any of the specifics that are essential. The get along dimension or intent is show that you care, that you're considerate, that friendly chit chat. Don't make it just all business, but make sure that you're taking care of the whole person. And then the final quadrant of the lens of understanding, the get appreciated intent, is recognize their contributions, be enthusiastic with appreciation. So, right, those would be other ways they could use blending based off of the intent of the other person.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's the listening part, right? So we want to make sure that we start with that step. There's a few other parts of this whole model that I think really we can at least touch upon, maybe not unpack fully, but one of them really is kind of telling your truth in a way that builds them up rather than tears them down. So this is really for feedback. This is for that kind of communication where you really want them to take the advice, to take the feedback. You want to make sure you do it the right way. And you give some great keys to open and honest conversations. One of them is use I language. So don't assume that this is something that is just everyone understood, but from my point of view or the way I see it, that works for me. That works on the personal level, that works on the professional level. Because so often you say maybe to your spouse, well, you're not doing things, you're lazy, or you're not doing it the right way, versus what I see right here. And I'm really speaking now to more observable behaviors.
Yes.
Not trying to assassinate their character. I'm just saying, here's what I've observed, right?
Yeah. It separates it. You're not saying that this is the way it is. on the tablets that were brought down on high. This is just how I'm looking at it. And so it allows for two different opinions simultaneously.
So use that I language, take it from my point of view, be specific about the problem behavior. Don't look at the personality like we talked about before. Look at it from give specific examples. Don't make generalizations,
Mm,
which I think a lot of people do professionally and personally. Every time we meet, you always exaggerate
yeah, right.
right. So you want to make sure you get specific with that problem behavior. You want to show them how the behavior is self-defeating. And this could be a blind spot for that individual.
Right,
So
right.
you might have to give examples really to illuminate it for them. And hopefully they don't get defensive as a result of it. And then suggesting new behaviors or options, right? Which I think that's where a lot of managers, leaders kind of fall off, right? They show them the way and then they expect them to say, okay, they should know what to do.
Hmm.
But in many cases, the biggest obstacle is they don't want to hurt their feelings. But then you don't want to stop it at just here's this self defeating behavior. A lot of times you have to connect the dots for them and say, okay, here's new behavior options that you could do
Yeah.
that are more acceptable, right?
Yeah. If they had those dots, they would have connected them. So yeah,
There you go.
you're establishing
Exactly. I love that. Yes.
establish a new pattern. And then it's going to be super critical that you observe. And anytime they take a step that's different, they acted in this way, you say, thank you. That was great what you did. Oh, I really appreciate that. When I asked you if you could do it by Friday and you said, let me think about it so I can make a realistic commitment. That's perfect. That was great. So you really want to come back with that feedback loop of acknowledgement and appreciation. It's like, you're trying to cultivate a new behavior. So you want to nourish it.
Well, that's so difficult because a lot of people look at the feedback, right, as constructive or corrective feedback. They don't know that they need to have a lot more positive feedback and reinforce those behaviors that they see happening, which takes time,
Mhm.
takes effort.
Yeah.
But if you want to cultivate that culture, it starts with that individual doing it consistently.
Yes, definitely does.
Let's try to unpack at least two of these difficult behaviors in a little more detail to help our listeners out. Like to take the first two are on two extremes. One is very confrontational, in your face, the tank behavior. They're pointed, they're angry, they're aggressive. It's what you say is the most honest behavior, but what you shouldn't do, and then I'll let you talk about what you should do. What you shouldn't do is you shouldn't shut down and
Right.
become a nothing person because they don't respect that, the
Yeah.
tank. You shouldn't defend, explain, or justify your position because they don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And you don't want to elevate the situation and counterattack. So two tanks are now going at it, and it just escalates the situation to something much worse. So those are what you should not do. What should you do when someone comes and confronts you and exhibits that tank behavior?
Well, you're going to have to up your assertiveness level. Technically speaking, tank to tank warfare is an option. You think you can be better tank. You say, make my day, but you might not do that in all contexts of relationships, but you're going to have to up your assertiveness level. Everything's got to happen more quickly. The tank is about making it happen yesterday. So there's no lengthy stuff here. It's going to be very direct and to the point. I would say if the tank is yelling you, it's always good for people to get a little bit out of their system, but you don't want to let a tank vent for too long because the tank is demanding action. And if people just freeze, there's just inaction and that escalates the tank further. So I'd say 60 seconds or less before you interrupt the attack. Best way to interrupt is say their name a few times. Do not comment on marital status or their parents' canine gender. You say, sir, Frank, Mr. Bender, Mr. Bender. And then without waiting for an opening, you backtrack some greatest hits. I hear you think we're genetic mistakes and we're way behind. You bet you're way behind. Your will's going to cost us, sir. Here it's going to cost us. So now you're in a moment of you just gave I'm listening to you. And they say a little more and you butt in, you go, I'm listening to you. They say a little more, I'm listening to you. I would say 3 rounds of that before you take the next step. And this is because of something in human behavior called the generalization point. If we drive someplace and we stop at 2 or 3 red lights in a row, we say, all the lights are red today. If we meet 2 or 3 people in a bad mood, we say, everybody's in a bad mood today. This is the generalization point. It only takes 2, 3, you're over the top. So when I go interrupt, backtrack 1, I'm listening, interrupt, backtrack 2, I'm listening, interrupt, backtrack 3, I'm listening. I'm letting the tank know that they're being heard. And then from there, we go right to the bottom line of the situation. Now, what you say depends on the situation, but it's always short and to the point. The ideal bottom line is to establish some kind of common intent that you and they are really on the same side. I tell you, I saw this happen at a lost luggage claim once. I'm the second person in line. The guy in front of me is tanking the person at the counter as if she purposely mislabeled his bags and sent them to Canada. So he's going on and on and on. And all of a sudden she puts her pen down. She goes, sir, sir, I get this is very inconvenient for you and you think we're total idiots for losing your luggage. Backtrack blend, I'm listening. However, there are only two people at this counter who care about recovering your luggage. And of those two people, one of them is quickly losing interest. And he said, what do you need to know first? Now, consider what you know. Two people are at the counter who care about the luggage. Your intent now is get your bags back. My intent, get your bags back. Same side, common purpose, and your behavior is defeating our purpose. And he got it. And therein lies a really big advantage of dealing with tank behavior. You can be very direct, very blunt, and they don't take that as rude. It's the proverbial high school bully you stand up to and then becomes best friend because assertive people like assertive people. So obviously there's some inner game here, within your own head and attitude to be able to get yourself to do that, especially if you're more passive. But that is what it's going to take.
No, that's great because you need to command respect because tanks don't attack people they respect.
Right.
But let's say at the end here, say that their accusations of you are untrue. Their perceptions unrealistic. Their demands were maybe unfair. So now you're saying you must redirect to a peaceful solution by offering them the last word, but you should be able to decide where and when, correct?
Yes. And really what happens at the end there, it would really depend on who we talking with, what's our relationship, is this our boss, our coworker, a
Say it's
customer?
your boss and they're coming in and it's not true what they're saying. How can you have peace with honor?
Well, I would probably want to get to a point where if I feel like they are perceiving something in a certain way and think it's not happening that way, then there's a very important thing called behavioral definitions. These behaviors equals this concept. So whatever concept they think should be happening there, the behaviors they're seeing are not equaling that. Whereas they might really be going in that direction, but they don't perceive it that way. So then we want to understand what they're, everybody needs to be focused on this. Then you'd go, the magic question is, all right, it's behavioral definitions that people say you don't, whatever, but you do. That means it's a behavioral definition. And you say, all right, I would want you to, all right, let's say the team has to be focused. Everybody's just doing things all over the place. All right, sir, how would you know if the team was focused? What specifically would you see or hear that would
So
let you?
get down to observable specifics. So you
Yes,
clarify your
observable
definition.
behaviors. These behaviors equals to them. The team is focused and on task. So you may know they're on task, but the things that the tank is looking for that represents it in their mind are being missed. And
So it's clarifying that, getting a very specific detailed understanding of what they mean by that. So you could address that more specifically.
exactly.
How about when their accusations are true and you did do something incorrectly, you made a mistake?
Then you say, thank you. I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. Here's what we're going to do about it. Okay. You don't have to go through what you don't want to do is defend, explain, and justify. That's called dextify. Oh, but we thought of this. I don't know. Flush that. Not with a tank. It'd be like, thank you. Here's what we're going to do about it. It's a future focused, action oriented is what you want to do with them.
So you recognize or you acknowledge to them, yes, I did make that mistake.
Yes.
Won't happen again in the future because of these things that I'm going to do to correct the situation
Perfect.
and be done with it.
In fact, you did something really important there where here's what we're going to do about it, but you want these actions in the future. Here's what we're going to do in the future to make sure this never happens again. So there's two futures. There's one, let's say the immediate thing we're going to take care of it. We'll call the client. We'll handle this tomorrow. And here's what we're going to do to make sure this doesn't happen again. So maybe actions that are beyond the current situation. Because sometimes what happens is you solve the problem and the tank keeps going. And what's usually going on at that moment is they're already in the future, seeing it happen again with a more important client, boom. And so they're attacking about a fantasy in the future. So that's terrific. Charles, you passed. You did.
All right. That's taking a corrective action to fix a solution, to fix a problem right now. And then you give them a game plan to make sure that that kind of problem doesn't happen in the future.
Yes.
Perfect. So that's on the aggressive side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum, the passive side of the spectrum, is the nothing person, which we see a lot more in this virtual world,
Hmm.
where this behavior becomes increasingly geared toward gaining approval and avoiding disapproval. And it could be wishy-washy. It could be yes, maybe people, or just really the passive nothing person. How do you engage them into conversations, getting them more engaged? What you should not do, and then you can go into what you should do, is you shouldn't be impatient and be frustrated with them and drive nothing people into deeper nothingness. And then you should not get, you know, to where your frustration can turn easily into aggressive communication, which will guarantee that you get nothing out of this person. Being impatient with a get along, nothing people who are trying to already avoid conflict and disapproval, you're going to drive them further down that path of nothingness. So
That's right.
that's what you should not do. What should you do for these nothing people?
Well, one thing depends on our context. Are we talking about our child, or are we talking about people at a meeting, virtual
Let's
or
do a virtual team, right? Say they're
okay.
part of a virtual team or a hybrid team. It's not in a personal context. I mean, we can talk about that too, because I think that's great for teenagers, right? So
Oh yeah.
give some insights into that, but let's first talk about it in a workplace setting.
Well, in a meeting context, first of all, and in general, in any meeting, whether we're talking virtual or in person or hybrid, whatever, some people are going to talk too much and other people are not going to talk at all based on their assertiveness level. And I urge people to think in terms of holographic thinking. This is how your eyes work. Your two eyes see, you take your finger like this and you close your right eye and then open and now close your left eye. The finger seems to move back and forth. Isn't that incredible? Your two eyes see from two different points of view. Imagine them arguing whose point of view is correct. They're both correct. They're both different. And when your brain synthesizes the points of view, you see three dimensions. This is why we can perceive depth. If we let assertive people dominate in the meeting and passive people drop out, we lose the hologram automatically. And so in any kind of meeting, there should be some sort of speaking order. All right. I'd say there could be a voluntary speaking order. Maybe people raise their hand, whether it's to use the virtual hand in, let's say, a Zoom or such, and they get called on. So all they have to do is this, because otherwise, if there's no speaking order, your assertive people are going to listen for each other's breathing changes. When one person stops, they jump in. Meanwhile, all the passives just drop out. Personally, what I like is a speaking order that you establish. We're just going to go around the room, and we're going to go in alphabetical order today by first name. Next time, maybe we go alphabetical by last name. You can mix up the order, but you simply go around the room and you call on people as the leader, and then you're going to be guaranteed you're going to hear from everybody because nobody has to interrupt anybody else. Everybody's getting their turn. There should always be a speaking order, and I'd say it's got to be voluntary if you have too many people. But if you got a dozen or less, yeah, going around the room is a great way to do it, and then you're gonna ensure you hear from people. And then what you also should do, is what I call flight recording, where whatever people say, you summarize it in a way they can see. So a blank PowerPoint slide is great for this. In the title area, you put whatever it's about. All right, we're gonna move the office. Okay, it's the office move. And then as we go around the room and people make comments, whatever you bullet that order. And what happens is with visual communication, it remains over time. So that point is still in our consciousness. If we didn't have that visual information, people are going to repeat themselves to make sure it's heard because what you say exists and then it's gone. So you could have, and without the speaking order, one person's going to repeat a bunch of stuff a couple of times. Other people who agree with them are going to do it a couple of times. Whereas if you bullet what people say, when it's one person's turn, they may, I agree with what Charles said about this and this. And what I'd like to add is this, let them let you know what they think, but then they add something to the mix. And I have found this totally eliminates conflict at meeting, and you will get a higher quality result in half the time of the meeting.
Love those tips. Now let's move into the personal space, even with individuals. I love how you state it, and I've used this as well. Ask open-ended questions expectantly.
Mhm.
So if you have a nothing teenager, if you have a nothing employee, try not to ask questions that can be answered with a yes, no, or a grunt, right?
Right. Right.
Use words like who, what, where, when, how, depending on the topic of the discussion, and request a specific information about their thoughts, right? What are you thinking? How do you want to proceed? So that it forces them to talk more than giving you one word answers.
Yes, those are all good questions. It's the pace that you have to slow down with them, with nothing people. So, okay. Well, I hear that da, da, da. How would you like to proceed? And they say something, and you can go, well, can you backtrack that? Maybe you think for a moment because you're trying to blend with them. You're blending with their pace. So you can't, if you go too fast with nothing person, it's going to be a third degree and you push them deeper into nothingness. You have to really slow down and meet them where they are. And that's the trick is slowing down, really.
No, that's great. I mean, I know I practice it with my teenagers is lighten it up, right? When nothing else is
That's always
working,
good. Yeah.
a little humor can go a long way. Make it absurd, make it exaggerated just
Yeah.
to get them to crack a smile and lighten the mood
Oh, yeah.
and maybe bring down some of that armor.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, humor with anybody anywhere in the lens it knocks them out of the red zone if you get them to laugh.
But a lot of time, some people aren't good with the humor or they don't feel it's appropriate. So you can also just guess, right? If the
Oh,
next
yeah.
person has remained silent and nothing else has gotten results, you can always exercise that option, right?
Yes. You start with, I don't know what's going on for you, but if I was you and I was in this situation, I might be thinking da da da, da, or maybe no, maybe this, or perhaps that. It's all not this is what it would be, but maybe this, perhaps that. I don't know, but maybe this. You're putting all these things out there, and what's the great about guessing is if you hit on something, the jig is up and they usually come out and tell you what's going on. And if you don't come close at all, you're totally out on another planet. Usually that brings them out because they feel sorry for no conception of reality. Here's what's going on for me. So guessing is like can't miss strategy.
The other strategy that works with these individuals is kind of show them the future, right? The only way to get a nothing person talking maybe is to take them out of this one moment in time,
Yeah.
show them the consequences of continued silence in the future. And then perhaps they can find enough perspective and motivation then to open up. It
Right.
doesn't always work, but that could be an effective strategy as well, right?
Absolutely. You're basically taking them on a walk into the future. If it continues like this, then this is going to happen. And we're whatever what we say depends on our situation, relationships, et cetera. But you take nothing into the future and show them a future that they really don't want to have.
This has been great, Rick. I'd love to have you back on the podcast to unpack a few more of these, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this episode. So I always like to end each episode with a call to action. What would be the first thing a leader, an individual could do to get better at this in dealing with difficult people? What would be that first step for them to take?
Well, you want to observe, you want to learn from all your experience. The good thing about this communication stuff is you don't have to go out of your way to learn it. It's around you all the time. You just have to keep a part of yourself, what's called meta, like a periscope, paying it attention at a different level to what's going on. And then it's very useful then afterwards to kind of debrief with yourself. Well, what did work? What didn't work? And what I encourage people to do is establish a communication partner, somebody, and this is what my co-author Rick and I did and how we started whatever everything with our career is we would meet on lunch on Friday. We would divide it in half. Half hour was focused on him. What'd you notice this week in community? What did you try? What worked? What didn't work? What are you going to do next week with that person? And then half on me. What'd you notice? What'd you try? What worked? What didn't work? And because we had that debrief, we could look back at our experience and learn from it. You're going to have enough experience. You don't have to worry about that. You just have to stay conscious. And then because you're meeting with this person once a week, you're going to pay attention at a different level and you're going to have that reflective moment. It's such a simple thing to do, but it would be totally transformative.
Well, you're right. It's such a simple thing to do. It's just remembering to do it consistently enough for the results to pay off, which I think is critical.
Yeah, and you might not pay attention the first week, but if have lunch with Charles and you tell me all this stuff that you observed, I'm like, oh my God, I did terrible. All right, this week I'm paying attention.
So critical to have that accountability partner. You're right.
Yes.
Well, remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you, Rick.
Well, drrickbrinkman.com, drrickbrinkman.com is probably the best way to contact. You can email me through there. Book Dealing with People You Can't Stand and Dealing with Meetings You Can't Stand are definitely the two texts if anybody wanted to follow up on that. And they're available everywhere. Amazon, People You Can't Stand is in 25 languages. It seems that everybody in the world can't stand each other, and Meetings is in quite a few languages also. And that will transform your meetings. I mean, it is so simple to transform your meetings. And the beautiful thing about transforming a meeting, if you come up with a suggestion, you don't run the meeting, but you say to the person, hey, who runs it, how'd you like to hear an idea that makes our meeting shorter and more productive? It's a rare human being says, wow, we don't want that. What are we going to do for waste time and misery? It's so easy to transform meetings, and that book will tell you how.
Love both those books. And thank you again for joining me today. This concludes this episode of the IMS Leadership Conversations podcast. You can send us your feedback at info@ims-online.com. If you'd like to subscribe, this podcast can be found both on Apple and Spotify. It can also be accessed on the Institute for Management Studies website at ims-online.com. And until next time, remember, it's not what you know that makes a difference, but what you do consistently.